Kenyan politics is about to be interrupted in a way it has never ever been interrupted before. Because there's this disruptor, a candidate who's gaining popularity by the day, indeed right across the country, Professor George Wajackoyah. Hey, I mean, the man's campaign has just taken off. He doesn't have any billboards up yet. He's not holding massive rallies across the country. But his supporters are increasing dramatically by the day. And according to my latest findings on the ground, what this man is up to will have a very huge impact on the presidential election. Indeed, we can now confidently say that this is no longer a two-horse race, as we've always said. No. It is a race involving 3 horses: Ruto, Raila, and Wajackoya. Yeah. But don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Wajackoya is going to win. No. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. Because I'm sure there are those of you who are imagining a cabinet meeting at State House with a lot of smoke and aroma coming out of the window of a certain herb. Sorry to burst your bubble. I'm not saying Wajackoya will win, but he will greatly change the results, the expected results, the results we are seeing, in polls. He will completely disrupt and change those. So who's going to lose? Who's going to gain? I'll answer that one immediately. Both 2 major presidential candidates will lose in a major way. Stay with me and find out exactly how. Karibu sana. Enjoy. Now, I don't know if you have noticed this, but I have, and I'm sure a few have. The Azimio chaps have been making an effort in recent times to increase or improve the entertainment value of their campaigns. That is basics in communications. There's no way you're going to communicate by being boring. Like one side of the political divide is. I'm not mentioning names. And I have not mentioned anybody. You don't communicate by being boring. But you see what has forced Azimio's hand? But they're the guys behind that campaign. Sharp guys. Anyway, what has forced Azimio's hand is this man, this interrupter of Kenyan politics, this weed-loving professor, Wajackoya. In a recent interview that I took in, Wajackoya was replying to a question, and he said, haka kakitu, unajua tukiuza, itatuletea 3.2 million US dollars per bag. Hiyo tunamaliza deni zote. Tunanyorosha uchumi wa Kenya. And then the interviewer asks him, hata si hiyo pesa itakulwa tu, corruption bado iko. Wajackoya's response, no, in my government hawatakula, si tutawanyonga. I'm telling you, this guy, Yeah, of course, what he's referring to is that in his proposals, people found guilty of corruption will face the hangman's noose. There'll be no other punishment for that crime, for that economic crime. Of course, we're still at the honeymoon stage of promises, because we all know for somebody to pass a new law in Kenya, it has to go to Parliament, where all those corruption suspects are. And then the corruption suspects will need to vote, bring in a majority vote to introduce the Hanging Act to persons found guilty of corruption. It cannot be done by executive order, the way Wajackoya seems to be implying. But who cares? Kenyans just love this guy. Now, Wajackoya is causing all kinds of ripples, not only forcing Azimio to adjust their campaigns, bring in more entertainment value, but is now also forcing the numbers people to take another look at their figures. Oh yes. And I've recently been doing a survey, and I've refused to believe the findings of my survey. Oh yes. I have refused to believe it. Yeah, but the survey is very clear in what it's telling me. What the survey is telling me is that taking in the current figures from opinion polls, using them with the number of voters registered in Kenya, and I'm taking the latest opinion poll, what it tells me, considering what I've found out about this candidate, Wajackoya, on the ground, what it tells me is that this man has a very high chance of forcing a runoff. What it tells me is that this is no longer a two-horse race. No. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a three-horse race. 3 horses. Let me explain. Now, assuming Wajackoya gets 2 million votes, of course he's going to be a distant third. However, because of his 2 million votes, and because the other 2 candidates will be fairly close to each other in terms of the votes they've gotten, it means that Wajackoya is going to force a runoff. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not saying the results will be different. I still hold the opinion that the Azimio candidate will win. But here is what the numbers are telling me is going to happen. Assuming that Wajackoya gets votes from both candidates, which is what I'm seeing on the ground, and both candidates are close to each other in the number of votes they get, it will mean that the winner of the first round of the presidential election will fail to attain the constitutional requirement of 50% of the votes cast plus 1. That's really what I'm saying. Now, hearing Wajackoya speak, my assumption was that professionals in Kenya, wale vijana wamesoma, or younger Kenyans, middle-aged Kenyans who have gone to school, will not and will never vote for this man. I was wrong. For whatever reason there is, young professionals, middle-aged professionals, I found Wajackoya voters, supporters, across the board. Maybe the best example to give is this person in the medical profession. They're almost 40 years old. And they told me that they had decided not to vote But now they've been given a reason to vote because they have found a candidate to vote for. That is how they started the conversation. And so obviously I assumed they were going to say Azimio. And they were going to say they are now voting for Azimio because of the Azimio Deputy President Designate, Martha Karua. Kwa sababu huyu ni mtu amesoma. He is in the medical profession. He understands what bangi is and its effects, etc., etc. This pharmacist told me he is voting Wajackoya and nobody will stop him. Now, let me give you a little evidence to prove to you just how much Wajackoya is loved by Kenyans. Although love for somebody does not always translate to voting for that person. That is true. However, let me just give you this piece of evidence. William Samoei Ruto and Raila Odinga, before they appear in a meeting somewhere, there is groundwork which is usually done. Mobilization takes place to ensure that the meeting is well attended. That is true both for Raila Odinga and William Samoei Ruto, isn't it? However, this is not the case for George Wajackoyah. No. He just gets into his vehicles, drives somewhere, comes out of his vehicle, within minutes there's a crowd of Kenyans. What? The man does not have any party machinery like the Azimio juggernaut or William Samoei Ruto's UDA. No. He has no people on the ground. It's just him. What? Now, of course, as I always say on this channel, politics is very fluid. There is a good chance that things could change tomorrow. However, if elections were held today or had been held yesterday, from my findings so far, George Wajackoyah, the presidential candidate, would garner nothing less than 2 million votes, which would be enough to disrupt the presidential election results, forcing a runoff. Now I can hear somebody saying, we hear you, Chris, but the difference is the same. I'm copying that phrase from a friend a few years back. The difference is the same means that there's no difference. The difference is the same because the same people who are supposed to win are the ones who are going to win. Even if you repeat the election 10 times, you're going to get the same results. I can hear somebody saying that. Now hold on a minute. You need to know, hii kitu inaitwa runoff, ogopa. Really fear something called a runoff. Because a runoff is a very different, deadly, dangerous, damaging animal. Let me explain. In 2005, there was a presidential election in a country called Liberia. And what happened is that the citizens of that country petitioned their national hero, a soccer player, very famous, called George Wajackoyah. They petitioned him and told him, please come back to Liberia and run for president. We'll vote for you. At first, of course, he ignored. And then finally, he bowed to pressure from the people. Now, this one was real. It's not like the one people claim they have here. You hear Kenyan politicians say, the people have pressurized me. Well, he only means his concubine, his relative, and another campaign manager who knows if the guy runs. He's rich. Anyway, the George Wajackoyah case was real. And of course there was resistance at first. Yeah, the main issue he had was that he was already a citizen of France. Yeah, and therefore people said, you can't have a foreigner, somebody who's already taken up the citizenship of another country, running for president. Anyway, he surmounted all those obstacles and was in the ballot, and the presidential election took place. Now, predictably, in the first round, George Wajackoya won. And you can see the figures on your screens right now. Yeah, he beat Johnson Sirleaf, a lady. I remember the year 2005 very well, especially because it was the year that I launched my Kumekucha blog. And although I didn't say anything on my blog about the Liberian elections, I was following it very closely. Yeah, because I was a fan for a long time of George Wajackoyah. He was one of the pioneering African players in the big leagues, yeah, of soccer in the world. But then although Wajackoyah won the first round, it was not conclusive. They had to go for a runoff. And this deadly, dangerous, damaging animal called a runoff reared its head. Because I was sure Wajackoyah was going to be president of Liberia in 2005. But when the results came in, Johnson Sirleaf had beaten him. She had won the election. How did this happen? How? Was there some pop going on? Rigging? No. This election was run with very heavy involvement in the process of the international community. It was free and fair and verifiable. So what happened? I think it is important for us to understand that a runoff is not really round two. No, it is a brand new election. And what makes it worse, it is a brand new elections na mafeelings mingi. Yeah, let me explain. You see, any election is very bruising. There are a lot of emotions flying around all over the place. And then you go for that election and you're exhausted. You're so emotional. And the results come out. And then now you have to go again for another election. You carry those emotions from round one into round two. And the results can be totally unpredictable. Let me just give you an example. Maybe you're one of the fringe candidates and George Wajackoyah came to campaign in your area. And the way his people showed arrogance that they're definitely winning, the way they showed you are nothing, you got very hurt. And now there's a runoff. You're not running because a runoff is only the top two candidates. But now you decide, let me teach this man a lesson. I'm going to support the woman. And there's so many other things that will generate emotion that could really mess up the person who was supposed to win. Yeah, completely mess them up in a runoff. Ogopa runoff. Ogopa sana. Tena sana. Now, you know this thing of a candidate coming from nowhere and disrupting an election has happened in Kenya before. This is not the first time. And I'm seeing a lot of telltale signs that remind me very much of our presidential elections right here in Kenya in 1992. Now, of course, at that time, we did not have the 50+1 rule. Yeah, it was simply the person who got the majority. And then they had to get a certain percentage in provinces of Kenya. 50+1 was not there. Now, going into those elections, Ken Matiba was already a hero, yeah, of the second liberation. But he had suffered a massive stroke, yeah, in detention. He had been treated in London. And the Matiba who came back was unrecognizable. It was not the same Matiba. It was clear that he was sick. Indeed, he could not even sign his name on a document. Yeah, all his documents before the election board were signed on his behalf by his dear wife. And therefore, serious analysts at the time dismissed Matiba. Yeah, everybody knew that this was a two-horse race between incumbent President Daniel Toroitich arap Moi and Mwai Kibaki. But you can see the results on your screen right now. Ken Matiba got 1.4 million votes. Real votes. Daniel Toroitich arap Moi got 1.9 million votes. Many of them fake. Yeah, and that's why I still hold on to the opinion to this day that it is Matiba who won those elections. Anyway, my point is, Wajackoya reminds me very much of Matiba's campaign. Matiba did not hold rallies, major rallies across the country. Instead, he had only campaign posters. And then his campaigns were actually carried out by supporters across the country. Many matatus right across the country campaigned for Matiba. He was popular amongst the people right across the country. Now, in case you didn't know, that is exactly what is happening with Bwana George Wajackoyah. People are campaigning for him on the ground. He is yet to spend any money on a billboard, for instance. But his popularity is rising by the day. How? Word of mouth. And his supporters right there in the grassroots, campaigning for him, convincing their friends and relatives, let's vote for this man. Of course, we also have to remember that Kenyans are fed up. And therefore, the mood amongst Kenyans is perfect for this kind of candidate. A candidate who will definitely be something completely new. Kenyans are very bored of the same old, the same faces. Yeah. Therefore, a new fresh face, never before seen, is extremely attractive. Folks, ogopa Wajackoyah. Ogopa tena sana. Because all indications are that he is going to massively disrupt the 2022 presidential race. Now I urge you to look out for part 2 of this video, where I talk about the only way Wajackoyah can be stopped from disrupting the results of the upcoming presidential election. Make sure you don't miss it. Until next time, this is Kshs, Kumekucha.